So, for those of you that follow my videos, this is going to be somewhat comical to you guys, because after all the work that we did doing the electric fan setup, I realized that I have a problem after driving this today. So I was driving this up the Sepulveda Pass today. For those of you that don't live in California, that's the 405, not I-405. Up the 405, and it was probably about 65 out, 65 degrees outside. This thing got up to 207 going 70 miles an hour uphill. Immediately cooled down as soon as I went on the downhill side. I had to go to Sherman Oaks, so I stopped there to pick something up, turned around, and came right back up. Same thing happened. It got up to not quite as warm. It got up to like 205, 206. You know, by the time I got to the top of the hill, you know, it started to cool down as soon as I started going downhill. So I know what that means. That means that when it's 90 out, if I go to drive it up there, it's going to overheat. That is absolutely a radiator. That is a radiator capacity issue, 100%. I don't care what anybody says. The fan was running, you know, 100% because at 205 degrees, I have it set to turn the fan on 100% no matter what. And when you're going 70 miles an hour, the fan doesn't mean anything. That you've got your ramming air through the front of this thing at 70, 80 miles an hour. You know, 70 really is where I was at, 70, 75. That will absolutely cool it down, which tells me that this radiator is just not doing its job. So we're going to go ahead and swap this out with the Champion. I'm going to, so this is a copper radiator. I would have never put this in here. You know, I don't know why they did, the guy that owned it before me, but whatever. It's brand new copper, 3-core, but they're 1/2-inch tubes. So it's 1.5 inches worth of tube that's in this. I'm going to go to a 2-core aluminum radiator, which is going to have lower static pressure. But it's only 2 cores, but they're 3/4 inch tubes. Fatter tubes or wider tubes, 3/4 inch tubes, are going to cool better. There's no guesswork involved in that. Everybody knows an aluminum radiator. Well, first of all, aluminum, if you can remove the heat faster, aluminum will dissipate the heat faster. Copper has a higher capacity to absorb it, but also takes a lot longer to pull it out. So what this is telling me is, at that RPM, I'm cycling the coolant through here faster than I can cool it. I don't have enough cooling capacity. That's why it was heating up. And it absolutely explains why going downhill, you're putting a lot less energy into the coolant, so it cools down when you're going downhill. So, you know, real basic thing here, you know, most people run aluminum radiators in these things anyways. It's got such a small radiator in it. The 65s and 6s just do. You know, the 67s, they went to a larger radiator. So I went ahead and ordered it. I ordered it from Jegs, which I don't normally do, but they had it in stock. Champion did not have it in stock. And neither did Summit. Summit doesn't even carry it. The reason I went with the Champion is because the Champion core thickness will work. Griffin makes a radiator. It's too thick. ACP, who makes this radiator, actually, you can see right there. That's who makes this one. Trying out a new camera today, too, by the way. So let me know if you guys like it or if I sound worse. We're still playing with microphone settings. Anyways, this is an ACP. They make an aluminum, but it's 2 7/8 inches thick. It's not going to fit. This is 2.5. Actually, this is 2 3/8. 2 3/8, and it, as you guys know, where my fan is at in here, that is a very tight fit. I only had the Champion was the only choice, and I can't go to a 3-core. But I think it's going to be fine. Somebody else is running the Champion 2-core, and they said it was absolutely fine. They're running it with this fan, as a matter of fact. It's got the transcooler built in just like this one does. So it's literally going to be a drop-in replacement. So anyways, we'll get back as soon as it comes in. Well, it's finally here. This took way longer to get than I expected. Champion 2-row, 3/4 inch tube, aluminum radiator. I'm really curious to see. This is more of an experiment more than anything, because in theory, this radiator should perform similarly to the 3-core copper that I've got. But it's interesting. I actually kind of have a debate going with an engineer friend of mine, because aluminum does not conduct heat as well as copper, and that's actually a pretty well-known fact. We know that copper is a better conductor. However, aluminum will dissipate heat faster, but it'll also absorb it faster. It doesn't have as much capacity as copper or brass. So it'll be interesting to see how this performs. One thing I will say about this and why I'm interested in trying this radiator core is way thinner. It's about 1.68 inches thick, according to Champion. And it should have way less static pressure. Less static pressure means more airflow. More airflow always means more cooling. So it'll be really interesting to see how this performs. So anyways, we'll go ahead and get this thing installed, and we'll show you that. And hopefully we see an improvement in cooling. Well, we've already started by draining out half of the coolant on the concrete and the other half in the bucket, because the pitcocks can never seem to just go straight into the bucket. Of course, it's aimed perfectly when it goes out and hits the sway bar dead on and goes everywhere. That's always fun. Anyways, we're going to get the old radiator out of here. I'm going to disconnect the overflow line. I used some nice P-clips when I did this. So I'm going to take those off. I'm going to leave the fan on it, and I'm going to swap the fan out with the radiator out of here, because it's just so much easier to get to that way. And, we take the upper and lower radiator hose loose. I got to be careful down on that one. There's 2 hose clamps on there, because the other one kind of holds the temperature sender for the HF125 fan controller. So I got to watch out for that. I just got to be careful. It's just a little brass sensor. And then it's literally just 4 bolts. This is, and you have to take the transcooler line off too. You have to take both of those off if you have an auto trans like I do. And I'll have to transfer over my fittings, the 1/8 inch NPT fittings, to barb for those cooler lines. But then it's just the 4 bolts. They're 5/16 bolts, so they're 1/2 inch head. And we just pull all 4 out, and this thing just literally comes straight out. It's not hard to get out of here at all. I will say the new aluminum one is considerably lighter, which is to be expected. I mean, I knew that would be the case. It's just a lot easier to handle. So I'm just going to take all the hoses loose and pull those bolts out. And just like that, she's out. Not hard at all. Couple of tips I find with this now that I've had it out a few times. Take the lower bolts out first, then do the top ones. And then when you're putting it back in, put the top ones in, and then do the bottom ones. It just makes it kind of hang there a little bit better. While I've got this out, I'm not liking, this is a new alternator belt, relatively new. It's got like 500 miles on it, but I don't like the way it's wearing. I found that the Continentals are just better belts than the AC Delco ones, which is interesting because these are made in Mexico. This is made in the USA, but I think it comes down to design. This is a more robust belt. The Continentals in general, I've found, they're just better belts. So I got to pull the power steering one off of there in order to get to the alternator one. So I'm going to do that while this is out, because it's just so much easier to do right now. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to get my trans cooler fittings swapped out, put them in the new radiator, and I'm going to pull the fan off. Hell of a lot easier to do it right here. It's just access, right? Try and think about these things when you're doing these kind of jobs, make it easier on yourself. So let's do a little comparison here before I put the fan on the new radiator. One of the things I'm noticing that's really quite interesting here is the tubes So these are 3/4 inch tubes, and the copper radiator's got 1/2 inch tubes. And it's a well-known fact as well, if you do any kind of reading, that you can go to a larger tube because aluminum's a lot stronger than copper. The copper will crack when this won't, so you can go with a larger tube. The larger tubes have a propensity to crack with copper. These are thicker, that is for sure. So I don't know if it's thicker wall, or if it's just because the tube is larger, that this radius, you can visibly see that this radius is a lot bigger than on the copper radiator, which is really hard to tell because it's black. Maybe we can get the light right here. There. Let's see if we can get that to focus. Okay, yeah, you can see here. And the fin spacing, that's the other thing. That's a little bit different. It's more tightly packed on the aluminum one for sure, which means you're going to get more cooling fins per inch. That's a good thing. Let's take a look here. So, that's an interesting thing. And by the way, these things are 100% welded. It's aluminum with aluminum. Because copper is so fragile, they solder the fins to the tubes. And the solder actually makes the fins far less efficient. It almost takes it down to the efficiency of aluminum, because the heat transfer through the solder is not nearly as good. So this is going to be really interesting. I'm curious to see how this works out, but you can definitely see the tubes are a lot narrower than here. Now, I don't know if it's because it's thicker wall aluminum, or if it's because the tube itself is larger inside. It might be fatter, wider, because remember, these are oblong. The tubes look like this. If my 2 fingers were closed at the top, it would be a loop. So, yeah, I mean, we'll give it a shot. So I got the trans lines, the cooler fittings hooked up there. Just going to swap the fan over. It looks like Champion did a really good job of mimicking the holes that were already on the mount here. I think that my fan's just going to bolt right up. I'm not putting a shroud on this. They do make a shroud for it. I can get it if I need to. But it never had a problem cooling at idle. And really, that's the only time your fan's doing anything. If you're going 70 down the freeway and it's overheating, there's something else wrong. So, which is the issue that I had. And it's still possible that I have a tuning problem. I don't think so, though, because I've got it pretty well spot on. And I had help from somebody on the Vintage 6 forum who has been through this before, and certainly helped speed up the process of getting my tuning right. So I'm pretty certain I'm good there. It's very well could be the static pressure of a 3-core copper radiator, because I think these came with a 2-core. That could very well be the problem. So I'll just continue on with getting this in, and we'll check back in once I've got the thing bolted up. Okay, so it's all reinstalled. The only issue that I ran into is the discharge inlet to the radiator. This hose is going to be too short now, because it's higher up on the tank than the old radiator, and there's no way to address the radiator down unless I slotted it, and even then it won't go down much further because the frame. So I'm going to have to get a different hose, but this will work for right now. It's just a little short. I pulled it up the water neck a little bit to get a little bit more out of it. That's just a Scott Drake, it's a Concurs hose, but I heard they fit really well, so that's why I put it in. But it'll work just fine for now. It's well over the lip here, and it's nice and tight. It'll get me through till I order the right one, or find out what the right one's going to be, because I don't know. So it's all together. I threw, I don't know, 3/4 of this bottle in there. I had already had some red line in it, but I ran this stuff in my truck, and this stuff worked. I'm a fan of Royal Purple products. I'm not endorsed by them or anything like that. I just use their oil and their products. I found that they're high quality, and so and I have found that worked on my truck. It did lower the temp, so it helps. If anything, it helps keep from air bubbles forming on the tubes inside the radiator and in the block. If you don't have one of these, get yourself one. This is the greatest invention. It seals right up here. You can fill your coolant up there, and it allows the system to burp, because what you want to do is get the system up and running, get the thermostat open. It's going to purge a whole bunch of air out when you do that. Now this is a fresh rebuild. I didn't flush the block out because it's a fresh rebuild. There's really no purpose. I didn't see any sediment in the radiator. There was no issues there, so I didn't bother pulling the thermostat and doing any of that. So it shouldn't, it's going to have air in it because, I drained it from the, pulled the radiator out, and that doesn't get everything out of the block, but it gets a large amount of air in it. So we want to make sure that we burp that. So I'm going to get it filled up. In my case, I live in California, so I'm not going to run this 50-50. I'm going to run it like maybe 60-40 or 70-30, probably 70-30, just because freezing isn't a problem here, and water will cool better. I also forgot to put the overflow line back on. That's the other thing I got to do. So I'm going to get that overflow line back on. I'm going to start with water because I know it's going to at least take a gallon. I'm not really sure with the capacity of the new radiator, so I'm going to dump a gallon of water in there and I'll make up the rest with coolant. All right, so we got her fired up now. You just want to make sure you keep this filled. And once the thermostat opens, it's really going to burp out a lot. It's not going to do a lot right now because I just fired it up. Make sure you keep an eye on the temperature, because if there's air in there, that thing could shoot up. So you want to make sure that that doesn't happen, because it can. And if it does, you got to shut it off, let it cool down. It'll suck some of the fluid in and the air will come out if that happens. It looks to me like it's a steady rate up right now, maybe a little faster than normal, so that tells me there's probably a little air in there, but it's all right. So we'll wait till the thermostat opens up, and once the thermostat opens up, it's going to have a whole bunch of air that belches out, and you're going to want to keep feeding it with fluids until it won't take anymore, and you stop seeing air bubbles coming out. So this is going to be too early to tell, but I've got the electric fan turned all the way down. If you watch my video about the AutoCool controller, I have the temperature turned to where I want it to run as hot as possible, because I don't want the fan running right now. I want to keep the thermostat open, and the thing will not go over 183 degrees. So that's a pretty good sign, I would say. It wasn't doing that before. Now it's only 70 out today as opposed to 80 the last time I think I did this. So I may need to drive it, but the problem is I want to burp the system. So I may have to disable the fan. I may have to turn the fan off completely, and maybe pull the fuse for it or something, and let this thing heat up before I let the fan run at all, because it's running at the lowest RPM possible right now, which is, you can hardly feel any air, and it's stuck at 183. I mean, it will not, it's fluctuating 182, 183 sometimes. That's a good sign. I mean, but the hood's open, the trans is cold, so you're not getting any heat load from the trans. It hasn't been driven. So I'm not going to be optimistic yet, but that's a good sign. So right now I have the temperature control for the fan turned off, so the fail-safe is the only thing that's going to turn it on. Watch how fast it drops. So the fan just turned on. You can see it says fan 1 on there, so I'm just running the fail-safe just to prove a point here. Watch how fast this thing drops like a rock here in a second. So it takes a second, because remember, the temperature gauge for this is in the rear of the head, right? So it takes a second for the coolant to get there. Watch how fast this thing drops now. And then I have it set to turn off at 195. Now there's still coolant that it was cooling, so that's still cycling to the back of the head now. Look at it, it's dropping, even with the fan off. I'd like to compare this back to my other video that I did when I just had the fan, but I know it wasn't that fast. It took like a minute for it to do that with the fan full on. So I'd say we got better capacity here. So I wanted to cycle this a few times, getting it up to 200 degrees just to help get the air out of it, because with the fan running, it was staying so cool, the thermostat was closing. So, the proof is in the pudding. I got to drive it, so it was getting up. I was driving the same route, driving up the freeway, highway speed, cruising along 70 miles an hour, and it was getting up to 205 to 207. Okay, so we're going to compare that again. Now, I know I didn't video that before, so you have to take my word for it, but it's a little hard to video it and drive in LA. So I'm going to do another comparison with this radiator on the same route, and we'll see what the average temp is. I'm hoping that it's going to be a lot lower. So I'm driving right now. I'll just do a quickie on this. It's staying noticeably cooler. It as soon as I got up to speed after a good wide open run, I mean it dropped. It's still low. It's like 184. It was never below 190, 195 after a wide open throttle pull. So it's undoubtedly better. I'm gonna have to take it up on the highway and see how it does, but it's absolutely doing much better than it was. So to say that this is infinitely better would be an understatement. So I was gonna try and video it while I was driving, but it just wasn't gonna be a good idea. Driving up the 405. So if anybody is familiar with Los Angeles, and I'm on the west side, so I start at the bottom of the 405, go north, and then I get off at Mulholland, which is at the top of the hill. So that's a good stretch of road. Now, what was happening with this was, and I couldn't quite get up to the speeds that I wanted to, like I did last time, because traffic is screwed in LA even at 12:30 in the afternoon. I was maybe going 30, 40 miles an hour uphill just because everybody was driving so slow. There was just a lot of traffic, and it's definitely staying in the 180s. As I was climbing the hill, it kept creeping up, and I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, it's still got a similar issue, but I didn't have a whole lot of speed going for airflow, and so I kept driving, to get off. I watched it, no problem. It hit 200, and that's when my electric fan kicks into high speed. So if you have to watch my other video about the auto cool, but the auto cool only runs the fan up so fast before I have my fuel injection turn my fan on full speed. I was still climbing the hill at like 30, 40 miles an hour, 200 degrees. The fan kicked on high, and then traffic cleared up a little bit, and I stepped on it and I gave it the juice, and I was hauling ass uphill, and this thing dropped big time. And then it slowed down again just right before I got off, and with the fan, the fan had already taken it down to where it kicked it out of high speed, but it never got up again. So it's last time I had the fan kicking on 200 degrees. It was running full speed up the hill with, flying up the hill, and it still went up to 207. So it's fixed the problem, is what I'm saying. It's the temperature is absolutely regulating like it's supposed to. It needs the fan. The fan's got to run full speed when you're pulling a hill and putting a lot of heat into it. And you don't have a whole lot of vehicle speed to get wind in the radiator. It's going to need that fan, and the fan did exactly what it was supposed to. I mean, it dropped like a rock. So this has absolutely solved the problem. Aluminum radiators, in my experience, are always better. And as a man of science, I guess I should say, I know that copper is a better conductor. But I think the problem is that you can put a lot of heat into it, and it takes a lot to take the heat out of it. I think aluminum, you can heat it up faster, and you can dissipate it faster. I think it's a little bit more transparent, and that's certainly proven itself. Even backing in the driveway right now, when I pull up after, driving around, getting up to the house, and then I back into my driveway, and it's a little bit narrow, so it takes me a little bit. This thing always gets hot, because you just got done driving around, and then it doesn't have any air blowing into it as you're backing in. It never got hot. It got up to like 196, and the fan did what it was supposed to. It's detecting the temperature. It ramped the speed of the fan up a little bit, and it dropped right down. I mean, it happened right now, so now it's holding at like 192. It's infinitely better. So definitely recommend this radiator for an i6. It's smaller, it fits better, it's stronger, and it cools better. So, this is definitely a success. Run the Champion radiator. I think, it's just, I had a 3-core copper, and it just wasn't, it can't keep up with this one. It's pretty amazing. So, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. This is, I didn't show all the details of installing it. Look, putting a radiator in isn't hard. So, I'm sure there's probably other videos on it, but I just wanted to show, really, I wanted to do a comparison between the two. And aluminum is the way to go.